Well, the final whistle has just blown in the game between Ireland and Australia at the Aviva Stadium this afternoon, and that brings down the curtain on this year's 2024 Autumn International Series. Now, why don't we go and sit down just behind me there and talk about the game, and I'll give you my thoughts about what happened. So a huge day in Irish rugby, celebrating 150 years, a fantastic accomplishment. So my hat's off to everybody associated with Ireland rugby over the years. You've done a fantastic job to take your national team to the status it now enjoys in world rugby. So it was great seeing that celebrated at the Aviva Stadium today. It was also great seeing Cian Healy coming on later in the game to get his 134th cap for the Irish team, and that was a big milestone in the game as well. Now, the game started off with both teams getting the ball for several phases of play, and it got a bit scrappy, to be honest, in terms of the breakdowns in particular. And when we got to see the first scrum in the first few minutes as well, it took the referee 2 or 3 times to set that particular scrum. But it was Ireland who went close first up in this game, and it was Hugo Keenan that was darting towards the line to score a try for Ireland, and Andrew Callaway did a fantastic tackle when he got the ball away from Keenan, and it stopped the play. Now, there was somebody who made a comment in my last video, I think about the preview of this game, that made mention of how bad Andrew Callaway is tackling. I hope you saw that one. It was a fantastic tackle, and he went on to do many more in this game as well. So that was the first attacking raid of the game. Ireland went very, very close to Hugo Keenan, and already the pressure was starting to tell on the Australians, but their defence was very, very good in the early stages of this game. They were able to repel that particular attack and then get up the other end of the field when they finally got a penalty and an opportunity for Noah Lolesio to get his first kick at goal, and he was successful. So Australia went ahead early by 3 points to 0. Now, whilst he got that kick at goal for Australia, my eye was closely on Noah Lolesio in this game, because I thought he was going to be one of the pivotal parts of this game. And in the next few minutes, he let his team down on a number of occasions with very poor kicks and general play. And the guy just has some real trouble in being able to find a decent touch finder with kicks, whether they be from marks or whether they be from penalty kicks. He's only getting to put his forwards about 20 metres down the field. And at this level of rugby in the world today, you need to be making sure that you put your penalties at least 40 or 50 metres down the field. And that's what we saw from Sam Prendergast throughout this game. But Lolesio was really letting his forwards down by not gaining that much territory. And while it might look a small thing on the surface, it is a very big emotional impact on the team. If the forwards are doing all that hard work and their number 10 is not letting them go forward and gaining a lot of territory. And this would have a big significant outcome on this game, I believed, as we saw it go on. I was really impressed with Australia in that first 15 minutes because they did extremely well on defence. Ireland were throwing everything at them. And what I love about the Irish play is that they use these multiple phases through their forwards to basically tire you out and to commit players to the breakdown. And that's what they do so well in most of their games, Ireland, and they were doing it again early against Australia. And we started to see fantastic performances starting to come to the fore from the likes of Rob Valentini, Fraser McWright and Harry Wilson, the back three for Australia. And every time Doris or Van der Fleer put on one of those good runs on the inside channel, it was one of those guys that were there to compete at the breakdown. It did make the breakdown a little bit messy at times, as we saw both groups of forwards really committing themselves to try and get that ball back early for their own team. So we did see a couple of knock-ons and a couple of indiscretions at the breakdowns, but it was only through the ferocity of the play that was going on. Finlay Bealham caught my eye on the Irish side a couple of times. He did a couple of knock-ons that didn't help the Irish when they were getting some momentum forward. It stopped the play and gave Australia the opportunity to get the ball back in hand. And then it was around the 18th minute mark and we saw Australia do a fantastic lead up to a brilliant try that eventuated for Max Jorgensen out on the left wing. But prior to that, Australia had done some fantastic work in getting down into the Irish territory, putting multiple phases together, and then running a really good backline play that went right out to the left wing, and Jorgensen ended up going over. Now, I thought at this stage of the game, if Australia could find any way to be able to keep up this play for 80 minutes, they were going to push Ireland today in this particular game. So after 18 minutes, when they'd scored that try, had got that penalty, they were out to 10 points to 0, and they looked very good at this stage of the game. But what's always in the back of my mind with this Australian team, the way they're playing at the moment, is the amount of energy, the amount of tackles they're doing. And Ireland were doing something very smart in this game. They were keeping ball in hand. They were making Australia do a lot of tackles. They were sapping a lot of energy out of this Australian team. And I knew, like most of you probably knew as well, that in the second half, this was going to really start telling on this Australian team. But as long as they could stay in the battle, this Aussie team, they were going to be up for the fight. And they were doing that in the first 20-25 minutes of this game very well indeed. What we saw from Ireland, though, was a very controlled way of playing. They once again, Jamison Gibson-Park was throwing the ball out to the back to Sam Prendergast. He was getting other players running off him. We saw a lot of Mack Hansen, James Lowe, Robbie Henshaw and Bundy Aki in that first 25 minutes as they were hitting up the line, setting up second phase, third phase, fourth phase ball for Ireland. And it seemed to be only a matter of time when they were going to be able to get through and score a try. And so it was that really good Irish structural play came up to pay dividends for them in the end. Josh van der Flier went over from a good maul from a line-out, and Ireland were on the board. So the score was back to 10 points to 5. Unfortunately for Prendergast, he missed the conversion on that occasion. So that try was scored in the 24th minute for Ireland, and I think from then on they really started to gain momentum both with possession and with territory. The statistics were really starting to be one side, and Australia were having trouble getting out of their own 22 on a number of occasions. And if you watch Noah Lolesio, he is the problem for the Australians when it comes to their defensive work as well. Jake Gordon had to take a lot of box kicks to try and get Australia out of trouble because the ball wasn't getting out to Lolesio in a position for him to be able to gain territory. And when he did get the ball, he simply didn't kick it far enough to get Australia out of their problem zone. So that's a real issue for Joe Schmidt to work on with this team. Their clearances out of their 22 were very subpar, and most of that was linked to Noah Lolesio's poor performance with his kicking. I saw on a number of occasions, in fact, when Jake Gordon had to take those kicks, he was shaking his head because he was getting put under a lot of pressure, and there was no ability for him to get it out to his number 10 to be assured that they were going to get out of their 22 in a safe and effective manner. We hadn't seen Taniela Tupou in this Wallabies team for a few games, and he was back in this game and he played very well in that first 30 minutes. I thought we saw him do a couple of big tackles. He went in as well and cleared the ball out on a number of occasions, and he even had a brilliant run when he was in open space, almost giving the ability for Australia to score a try again. So he was on his game in this particular game, but we had to wait until the 32nd minute again of the first half before we saw more points in this game, and it came way of a penalty to Australia. Noah Lolesio getting this particular kick going over. So despite his very poor play in general play, he was kicking at the sticks pretty well, and he pushed Australia's lead out to 13 points to 5. Whilst the Aviva Stadium was rowdy at times with the Ireland on attack, they weren't scoring the points that you would have expected from this Irish team. It just seems as though either the Australian defence was really good in that first 30 minutes, or the odd pass from Ireland just wasn't going to hand and it wasn't getting finished off for them. We saw Mack Hansen and James Lowe out wide a couple of times, and it just didn't eventuate with them getting through the Australian defensive line. So a combination, I think, of really good Australian defence, good tight narrow running in the channels for the Australian defensive line, and also a few clumsy mistakes on behalf of Ireland. And so the halftime score was 13 points to 5 towards Australia, and I thought, well, this game is far from over because Ireland are going to come storming home in the second half. They've got a great bench to come on as well with a lot of experience, and this Australian team is made to do a lot of tackles in that first half. But the thing that was interesting that first half from a statistical point of view, Ireland missed 14 tackles, and we saw Australia getting through over the gain line on a number of occasions. The problem for Australia was they weren't able to convert that into any more points than 13 in the first half. Was that going to be enough to let them start off in the second half with a platform to win this game? I didn't think it was going to be enough. I would have thought they would have needed at least 20 points to feel safe against this Irish team. So I think the beginning of the second half was going to be crucial. If Australia were able to score first, it was definitely going to give them some momentum. And of course, if Ireland were able to score first in the second half, they were going to be able to come storming back. In that first half, I thought I saw good performances from Sam Prendergast, who was distributing the ball well. He was very good with his kicks as well when he did have a kick for touch. Unlike Noah Lolesio, he was finding 40 or 45 metres in distance, giving his forwards a good platform. We saw a couple of really good lineouts from Ireland on attack. And as I said, just a couple of those last-minute passes that didn't go to hand cost Ireland in that first half. I didn't think they were going to make that many mistakes in the second half. I thought the Irish scrum got better as the first half went along as well. They started to get more settled and putting the Australians under a lot of pressure. And in fact, that's what I saw in the first half. When Australia did have the ball from any kind of play, they always seemed to be under a bit of pressure. Ireland were very good at making sure that the speed of the breakdown was good and that the weight that was going on in the scrum was putting the Australian scrum under a lot of pressure. And that was an element that Ireland really dominated in that first half. So even though Australia were ahead on the scoreboard, a lot of their plays came from being under pressured situations, and sooner or later in this game that was going to tell on the scoreboard as well. For me, it was only a matter of time. So I think Andy Farrell would have said to the boys at half-time, look, just keep going out there, keep putting on the pressure, keep building the multiple phases of play, and this game will come to us. Australia will open up, and that was going to be exciting. I think for Australia, Joe Schmidt would have been happy with the scoreboard pressure that he had after that first half, but he was very aware of what Ireland was going to bring in the second half. He would have wanted Australia to be a lot more clean and structured when it came to the breakdown and to protect their players on defence as well, so that Lolesio and Jake Gordon weren't having so much pressure on them to get the ball out and get them ahead with their forwards. So an 8-point lead to Australia heading into the second half, and it didn't take long for Ireland to start making a difference on the scoreboard. In the 43rd minute, they got a penalty to Prendergast. He brought the score back to 13 points to 8, and you could just feel within the Aviva Stadium that Ireland was starting to build back into this game. And when Caelan Doris went over for a try in the 49th minute, that really set the sails for the Irish team as they started to build momentum and get themselves right back on parity on the scoreboard with Australia. One problem I had with the try from Doris, the play before, it was a definite knock-on, in my opinion, from Hugo Keenan as he chased the kick through. The referee and TMO didn't do anything about it. The Australian players appealed immediately, and what I saw with my eyes, I felt that it was a knock-on, and therefore the opportunity for Doris to score that try in the next play should not have come. It did. Ireland scored the try, and we got on with the game. So that was a really big psychological shift in the game, wasn't it? Where Australia had gone into halftime with a sensible lead, and immediately within 10 minutes of the second half, Ireland had grabbed the lead and gone ahead by 15 points to 13. Ireland were on the front foot now. They were getting a lot of ball. They were putting a lot of pressure on. They were continuing that momentum they had in the first half with multiple phases of play. And as the game went on, we saw the impact more by Caelan Doris and Josh van der Flier, in particular for Ireland, who I thought were doing some fantastic work around the breakdown, and this was giving the opportunity for Ireland to really put phase after phase of play together throughout their backline. Bundy Aki had made a couple of big busting runs to put the Australian defence under pressure, and this is what he does so well. He attracts 2 or 3 tacklers into him, and this gives the breakdown opportunity for van der Flier and Doris to come in and get the ball quickly back to the halfback, and Gibson Park was able to then reset off the next phase of play. And Australia were chasing shadows for a lot of the part of the beginning of the second half as Ireland were just putting the ball through hand time and time again. And not only was it possession that they were winning and dominating, it was also territory. And I just thought at this stage of the game, there's no way that Ireland's going to lose this game with so much possession and territory. They're going to have to really stuff things up if they're going to lose the game. They just had so much momentum going forward. But in the 54th minute, this Australian team bounced back again, and they do what they've been doing throughout the season at different times by just hustling and grinding away. They got a penalty kick opportunity to Lolesio. He put it over. So Australia went back into the lead again after 55 minutes by 16 points to 15. Okay, it was only a 1-point game, but this would have given Australia a lot of momentum. And there was still plenty of time left in this game with 25 minutes to go. And I thought the bench substitutions for both teams were going to be really, really critical in this game. The Australians were starting to look a little bit wounded as a number of players went down with injuries, and I thought Joe Schmidt had to be really careful with the timing of bringing his two big forward weapons on, and I'm talking about Solokai Loto and Langi Gleeson. I thought the timing of their injection into this game was going to be critical for Australia, because we knew Ireland, when they brought their bench on, were just going to go up to another level and really try and control this game. Australia needed to have something to repel that, and I think that Solokai Loto and Langi Gleeson are their two biggest defenders. But they also play a very big role in the attacking offensive play of the Australian unit. So if Australia had to come from behind to try and win this game, Joe Schmidt had to make sure those guys were as fresh as possible. So it was 16-15 heading into the last 20 minutes of the game, and Australia were the first ones to strike. We got another penalty kick to Lolesio that put Australia out to 19 points to 15. So it was a 4-point game with about 19 minutes to go, and this is where I thought it really counted for Australia. They were going to need to stop Ireland from continuing that pressure, or Ireland were going to get back into this game in the last 20 minutes. Were Australia going to be able to do it, or were Ireland going to be able to come over the top of the Australian team? That's what I was thinking as we went into that last 19 minutes of the game. Now, it's the little things that cost you in these big close test matches, and it was again Noah Lolesio who'd taken a mark in his own 2022. He kicked the ball but didn't find touch, and the ball went down to Ireland, who were able to then start another attacking raid. And while Australia should have been 50 or 60 metres down the field, they had Ireland pummeling them under pressure again, close to their own 22, and setting up attacking ball. It was at that stage of the game, around the 66th minute of the game, that we saw Andy Farrell pull the ripcord and make some changes at 9 and 10. We saw Gibson Park go off after what I thought was a very good game by him. He controlled a lot of good things and got the backs away on many occasions and kept the Irish forwards going forward. And Sam Prendergast went off as well. Other than that shocking conversion attempt, I thought he played pretty well. He kept the Irish backs going forward, just with shuffling the ball on and doing those little depth passes that he's very, very good at. But we saw Casey and Crowley come on, and I thought this was a great move by Andy Farrell. Casey's got that energy and that pace at halfback, and Crowley's got all that experience that he's bringing in to this Irish team now, and having him coming off the bench for that last kind of 18 minutes, I thought was a really, really good move by Andy Farrell. And then 1 minute later, we saw Cian Healy come on for his 134th cap for the Irish team. The most capped player, Brian O'Driscoll, of course, was the man that stood in his way. But now Cian Healy holds that mantle to himself. So congratulations to Healy and all his family, friends and fans across the world. A wonderful career so far, and it's still going. And I'm sure he had a point to prove when he came on the field in the 66th minute of this game. Now in the 68th minute, a huge play by Ireland. They did another attacking raid, got very close to the Australian line. In fact, they went over the line. And it was a fantastic try-saving tackle from Andrew Callaway and Fraser McWright that held the ball up over the line. And Australia were given the opportunity to be able to clear it. So again, Andrew Callaway, for that person that's been dumping on him in my videos, he did a great try-saving tackle on that situation for the Wallabies. The Wallabies, though, they were only going to get a bit of reprieve for a couple of minutes, because as soon as Ireland got the ball back again, they were back onto the attack and looking very dangerous. And in fact, it was only 4 minutes later, in the 72nd minute, that Ireland were back down on attack. The ball was put into the line out, and we had a fantastic rolling maul. And Gus McCarthy, that young replacement, had come on, and he got himself another try in the green jersey. And boy, I tell you what, this Gus McCarthy is going to be a fantastic player for Ireland in the future. He looks absolutely brilliant. Every time I've watched him play since he's come on in the last couple of games, he's done a very, very good job. And he got over the dot again to get the Irish ahead in this particular game. So Jack Crowley was able to nail the conversion of that, and that put Ireland in the lead at 22 points to 19, with about 8 minutes left on the clock. Now, were we going to see another Australia storming run to the finish line like we did against England? Were they going to be able to pull this one out of the bag, or were Ireland going to be able to use all of their experience and guile to be able to run the clock down and be able to get this great win at the Aviva Stadium in the 150th anniversary of Irish rugby? Well, it was going to be very intense for the last 7 or so minutes of the game. So with 6 minutes left in the game, Joe Schmidt decided to pull the parachute, and he got Noah Lolesio off the field. He brought on Tane Edmed for his debut for the Wallabies, and boy, what a pressure time to come on for the Wallabies. You're chasing the game, you're up against the second best team in world rugby, you're 4 minutes out from the end of the game, and you're expected to try and win the game. Well, I tell you what, as any young boy running around the backyard playing their imaginary game against the opposition team, this is exactly the position you want to be in, trying to win the game for your team, and I'm sure Tane Edmed was having those thoughts in his mind. But unfortunately, it was just 75 seconds later that he went off the field with an HIA. He had a bad head knock, and we wouldn't see him for the rest of the game. We saw Noah Lolesio come back on for the last couple of minutes for the Wallabies. Unfortunate for Tane Edmed, but it was good to see him run on the field for the Wallabies to become their latest debutant in the yellow jersey. But in the 79th minute, Australia got a penalty. Lolesio put a kick for touchdown field around about the halfway line, gave Australia one last chance to do a Hail Mary. Were they going to score another try like they did against England? Well, when the ball came out to Ikitau, I was looking for the flip pass behind his back, but it never came. He ran into the defensive line, got tackled, and the ball went out, recycled to the left-hand side. Unfortunately for the Australians, they ran out of ideas on this particular occasion, but it was also down to fantastic Irish pressure through their defensive line, and they came up and they spoiled the party for the Australians trying to get downfield to score that particular try they needed to win the game. So on this occasion, it was Josh van der Flier who went in there to the breakdown and secured the ball from the Australians, and that was the end of the game. The Irish had won this thrilling encounter by 22 points to 19, and what a game of rugby it was. Ireland had a lot of possession, a lot of territory in this game, but Australia did themselves proud by holding on at different stages throughout the game and keeping themselves in the game right down to that last 10 minutes. But for me, there were some simple factors that cost Australia this game. The first one was the way Ireland played in their multiple phases through their forwards. They were absolutely exceptional. And again, Doris and van der Flier and O'Mahony when he came on, and McCarthy when he was on the field as well. This fantastic ball after ball after ball they do through the inside channels puts so much pressure on the defensive line, it opens up opportunities out wide. We saw Hugo Keenan more involved in this game than we have in previous games for the Irish. James Lowe and Mac Hansen as well, without having too many significant breaks, and Bundy Aki was his exceptional self, I thought, in doing some of those great runs, but also big on attack and defence today, Bundy Aki. But it was the Irish forwards that won them this game. I thought they played very, very well. Their bench was really solid as well. We saw O'Toole come on, Cian Healy, of course, but Gus McCarthy, for me, was a standout for the Irish. And these are the guys that are going to really make the impact for this Irish team as they head into the Six Nations competition early in the new year. And I think this slight win over the Australians would have given them a lot of confidence as they build towards that Six Nations. I think the Irish team, particularly Andy Farrell, understands that this Australian team is no longer a walk in the park. This is a team under Joe Schmidt that's gone back to the top of world rugby, can compete against the best teams in the world any weekend, and on their day, they could have turned this one around and won it as well. They didn't. Ireland were too good. They had too much possession, too much territory, and they closed out the game very well. Ireland won the second half by 17 points to 6 on the scoreboard, and it just shows when you've got those structures and that kind of pressure through territory and possession, you're able to put points on the scoreboard, and that's what one of the best ranked teams in world rugby is able to do. And I think that's just the little bits that are missing at the moment from this Australian team. But what a northern tour they've had. They had 2 great wins against England and Wales. They got beaten up a little bit against Scotland in the second half last weekend, but they showed their character against Ireland today. And I'm going to tip my hat to Joe Schmidt, as I've been doing all year in my videos, because I think he's really turned this Australian team around. And while many people were shouting from the rooftops that the British and Iron Lions tour next year in Australia is going to be a one-sided affair, well, I'm now pleased to announce that is not going to be the case. This Australian team is going to compete, and I expect them to get even better next year. Ireland scored 3 tries in this game, but they were all to their forwards, so their back line didn't get over the Australian line. And that would have been something that Joe Schmidt was happy about despite losing this game. Ireland has a lot of power in their backline, a lot of speed, of course, and a lot of opportunities to score tries through their backline players, but it didn't happen in this particular game. So that's one area that I think Joe Schmidt would have been happy with. On the flip side of that, 3 forwards tries means they're not defending so well close to their line, and that's something else that you'll have to have a look at. But in the end, this was a very dominant performance by a very dominant Irish pack, and I think that's what really won them this game. And the talents of Caelan Doris, Josh van der Flier and others in that forward pack that were relentless when it came to putting defensive pressure on the Australians when they had their ball in hand. That's really what won Ireland this game, I thought. So a fantastic spectacle, I thought, for the 150th anniversary of the Irish Rugby Union. Congratulations to everyone in Ireland. I know a lot of Irish people watch my channel. I thought you deserved the win in the end because you had all that possession. You put Australia under a lot of pressure. And when it counted in the end, the second half, you came away showing on the scoreboard that you're able to put points on, and that's a champion team that's able to do that. So congratulations to everyone in Ireland, all of the players, all of their families and friends, and all of the people that were in the stadium. And if you were in the Aviva Stadium this evening for that game, let me know in the comments what it was like. It was a bit of a roller coaster, I'm sure, if you're an Irish fan. And if you're an Aussie sitting in the stand, what did you think of it? Did you think your team was going to get home in the end or not? I'd love to hear your views in the comments. I think it's been an absolutely wonderful autumn international series this year. We've seen some fantastic games. We've seen some results we didn't expect to see on these tight games. And we saw a couple of one-pointers as well, which were absolutely thrilling. I'd like to thank you all for supporting my channel throughout the autumn international series, for all the people that have made comments and been respectful in talking about this great game that we all love so much. I want to thank you as well. I want to thank all those people that have celebrated different milestones throughout this rugby season, whether it be most caps for your country, whether it be a milestone cap as a player or as a coach who's turned their rugby team around and looking at the future in 2025 very brightly, and we've seen that in a couple of occasions this year. We now look forward to the Six Nations, or I do. I look forward to the Six Nations in 2025. I will be covering all of those games like I have been here on Inside Rugby in the past. So I would love to join, I'd love you to join me for that experience as we kick off the international rugby season next year in 2025. So there we go, final score 22 points to 19 in favour of Ireland. It was a great game to close out this year's autumn international series. The Wallabies are definitely on an upward trajectory. Ireland are maintaining their presence at the top of world rugby, and everything's to play for in 2025. So I look forward to your continued support here on my channel through 2025. The best way to do that, of course, is to hit the subscribe button. If you have enjoyed this particular video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and a like. That helps me with the YouTube algorithm. And I'll be back again soon with some more content right here on Inside Rugby with Mark. Until next time, stay well, stay safe everyone, keep enjoying your rugby across the world. There's no downtime in this beautiful rugby game of ours. There's games all across the world for us to watch, and I'll see you again right here on my channel. So until next time, it's time to say adios from beautiful Cancun in Mexico, and I'll see you all again very soon. Bye for now.